Joining us. So thank you. I am Susan Demas, the executive editor of Lincoln Square. And joining me today is one of my most favorite people in the world, Jon King. He is the editor in chief of the Michigan Advance, and we used to work together. It's a publication that I founded a few years ago and does great work reporting on Michigan politics and policy. And before that, John spent several decades in radio, which is why you will hear that he has such a commanding voice. And really, I mean, you were made to do a podcast. So don't mean to throw more work on your plate, but definitely think that that's something. If I were in charge, I would put you on a podcast in a heartbeat. So thank you for being
Well,
here.
this will be my debut. We'll call
Okay.
it that. Thank you for having me, by the way. And
Yeah.
I just want to say, when we worked together, I worked for you, and you were a great boss, one of the
Oh,
best bosses I ever had. So, um,
well, thank you. And
yeah.
I know that you are a great boss to your employees too, and they're lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
So that's I'm sure people are sick of the love fest. So we'll move on to brass knuckle politics as they are in Michigan. And really, I couldn't talk to anybody who knows the situation better than you. And I thought we could just jump in because when people think about Michigan politics, I think the first thing that comes to mind is Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is a Democrat in her second term in Michigan. That means this is her last term because she can't run again, thanks to term limits. And boy, I mean, honestly, going back to her first term in 2019, people were already talking about her running for national office. I remember I wrote a few columns about that, and some of my Republican friends in Michigan were like, "What are you talking about? She got elected by an accident. She's not going anywhere. You're nuts. You're just trying to curry favor." And believe me, I don't need to curry favor with Gretchen Whitmer. I've known her for years. Um, but I mean, you either have talent or you don't. And especially during her first term, she really rose to prominence clashing with Trump during the pandemic. She was that woman for Michigan. Even if you weren't from Michigan, suddenly you knew who she was. And she got reelected in 2022 by a landslide. And during the will Biden drop out, should drop in Biden drop out drama that went on for months last year, a lot of people saw her as a savior, including reportedly President Barack Obama. So that's kind of the backstory there. But it seems like we're in a very different place in terms of looking at her future now, John. And I know this is something that you and your team have been covering. So catch us up. What is going on with Gretchen Whitmer these days?
Well, that's a great question. That there are a lot of answers out there. People throwing answers. I don't have an answer, and in fact, I feel like it is an enigma. Uh, you know, the Gretchen Whitmer of the first 6 years of her term, and then this seventh year, because certainly it seemed like an overnight change in how she approached things after the election. Um, and you mentioned how, especially in her first term. I mean, the thing that makes Gretchen Whitmer a political powerhouse is she has come across as authentic.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a rare quality in politics. People try
Yeah,
to
if
fake
if you think Michigan accent, you think Gretchen Whitmer.
right? And I think the whole "It's Shark Week, baby," and Big Gretch and all that stuff. It came, it was sort of a natural thing, and she played those as they came and played them well. And even when she stumbled, politically speaking, her first roads plan, was not great.
Right,
And
right, and just, for those outside of Michigan, that was her big campaign promise, "Fix the damn roads," and that kinda went to her authenticity because she got some blowback. "Oh, you're a woman, you're saying the word damn," and it's like, it's in Michigan, people drop their Gs, we swear, that's what we do. And, but our roads are terrible. I mean, if you've spent winters in Michigan, you know why. And, she said that is hurting our economy, hurting our businesses, hurting our safety. And that was the issue that resonated. And, then when she got into office, she had a Republican legislature. She proposed a 45-cent gas tax that was not really popular with anyone. And that was definitely a failure for her. But we should say, thanks to former President Biden's, infrastructure bill, the roads in Michigan are under constant construction, as we know. And, so there has been, some progress to that end.
Well, if there's the constancy of complaining about roads, it was the complaining about how bad the roads were, and now it's complaining about all this road construction. But I mean, out of that 45-cent gas tax hike, which didn't go well, but she played it well. And
Mhm.
then she didn't just drop the whole idea of fix the damn roads. I think most of your standard politicals would just be like, oh, that didn't work, drop it, forget it. And instead, I think she reworked it, doubled down on it, came up with a bonding plan, and moved forward with major road repairs to Michigan. So, I mean, again, that authenticity of, how she conducted herself, people connected to that.
Mhm.
And I think it was also the uncompromising, uh, uh, attitude towards President Trump in his first term. And that's really where I think a lot of the, impetus of, Whitmer, becoming a national figure, becoming a potential presidential, hopeful, um, grew in that first term of her opposition or uncompromising opposition uh, to Donald Trump. And once the prospect of a second Trump term started to come into focus and then became a reality after the election, that uncompromising stance has really melted away pretty fast. And I mean, we saw one thing that I have rarely seen, if ever seen, from Gretchen Whitmer are real bonehead kind of where you leave you scratching your head types of like, why would you do that? So, for instance, the Oval Office visit,
With
several months
President
back,
Trump.
right, with President Trump, and she was in D.C. to roll out this manufacturing plan that she was, how we can reinvigorate U.S. manufacturing, and then she's called over to the Oval Office, and next we see her in the Oval Office. So we have some images from that are indelible. That you go, what is this?
Right,
One,
with the binders on the
binders in
face.
front of her face, or trying to like hide from the press. I mean, I'm like, where are you? Where do you think you are? So that was weird. And then she's there with the Republican Speaker of the Michigan House, Matt Hall, MAGA Matt Hall,
Right.
and we know now palling around and joking
Yeah, and he
around with.
he kind of prances around as a mini Donald Trump, and pretty much every state has one of those, but this is Michigan's.
Yeah, and she's in the Oval Office, you know, uh, uh, in a sense, backslapping with folks who not much long before that were threats to democracy,
Which
still
she
are.
said, I mean, during the 2024 election, where she campaigned hard first for President Biden, then for Vice President Harris, she was definitely a team player, but she called Donald Trump an existential threat, which is dead on. I remember an article that you had written. Let's see, she called him a convicted felon running on vengeance and grievance, which is a fair assumption. But now all of a sudden, he hasn't gotten any better since his first term when she was dealing with him. Since then he has been convicted of crimes, and but now this is somebody that she seems desperate to partner with.
Right. I mean,
And
arguably,
and we should say, Donald Trump did win the state in 2024, but by a far smaller margin than she won either of her elections in 2018 or 2022.
right. And arguably, he's much worse in this second term than he was in the first term. And so many people came into the second term expecting, hoping, certainly I think expecting that she would, resume that mantle of uncompromising opposition to, anti-democratic small d actions coming out of the White House and unconstitutional actions, and um, we've not seen that. And in fact,
Mhm.
you know, and her stance on this has been, well, I'm here, you know, the people of Michigan elected me, and I'm here to get things done for them. And on one hand, you go, okay, let's take that at face value. And, you know, I have to work with this administration. You know, this is her sense of things. Like, I have to work with this administration, and so, you know, I'm going to do what I have to do for the people of Michigan. And you go,
Mhm.
okay, but and so, you know, where we saw that play out, it was with the announcement of the fighter wing. It was going to be based at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. This is a big Air National Guard base in Macomb County,
Yeah, right.
in Michigan,
My
which is a
my
very
husband grew up 10 minutes from there, so yeah, and
right.
it's huge for jobs and, that there's no doubt about it. Although there is some question, are those jobs ever really going to materialize?
Right, and so this seemingly palling around and sort of setting aside the uncompromising sense, and in fact compromising
Mhm,
on principles, on values, and that's the kind of thing where you just go, can you really, can you compromise on principles and values? We can find political compromises, sure, but I feel like, and I get the sense from many of her supporters and constituents that there is a compromising somewhat.
mhm.
And you know what was really, again, the visuals that come out of this. So when Donald Trump was at the Air National Guard base to announce that, you know, this fighter wing is going to be stationed here and we're going to save this base and these jobs, you know, up comes Gretchen Whitmer wearing a camouflage baseball cap, looking very much from the Christy Nome collection, and up there, you know, arm around, well, Trump had his arm around her. She looked
Trump
very
seems to
uncomfortable.
like putting his hands all over many
Well,
women,
he
but
does. And that was, it was, she looked uncomfortable. It was
mhm,
uncomfortable watching it. Because I think for many people it was like, what are you doing here? And
yeah,
I understand the notion of, you know, we want to get this base saved. These jobs are important. Macomb County is an important swing county, um, for Michigan. And so that's understandable. But again, as you mentioned earlier, we're talking about a president who makes many promises and the
mhm,
follow through is iffy at best.
yeah.
So if
I
that
I
wing
I
actually
wanna
gets, yeah,
Yeah,
please.
I want to flag one thing, and the this that because I want to get your take on it. I don't know if you recall, but back before the 2022 election, when she was running for her second term, um, she appeared with President Joe Biden at the Detroit Auto Show, which is a huge thing here in Michigan because obviously, we put the world on wheels and the auto industry still reigns supreme here, and um, there was a photo of her with President Biden and he grabbed her hand and they have a close relationship. She was on his short list for vice president, one of reportedly four people. She called him after the assassination attempt went public on her life from a bunch of MAGA supporters, many of whom were convicted. And we should say Donald Trump is toying with the idea of trying to get those folks pardons, at the same time that Gretchen Whitmer has kind of tried to cultivate this working relationship. But in our biggest newspaper, the Detroit News, conservative columnist Caitlin Buss wrote an entire column without talking to Gretchen Whitmer, being very outraged about what she perceived as sexual harassment against her because President Biden grabbed her hand. Meanwhile, I've seen this footage of Trump manhandling her at Selfridge. Did I miss an editorial from our conservative feminist columnist on that?
Yes, and you're going to continue to miss it because it will never
Mm,
exist. And yeah,
interesting.
I mean, this is the hypocrisy, that, you know, um, I mean, look, we're not naive waifs. Is politics, and so,
Mhm,
you know, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of that, but it is nonetheless interesting that Gretchen Whitmer is allowing herself to be a pawn in it.
mhm.
That's the difference. And so I think when the hand grab, you know, at the auto show, um, if I'm not mistaken, I think the governor downplayed it and was like, this is
This is
ridiculous.
not a
And
big deal,
this is not a
this
big
is not
deal.
unwanted touching.
Right. This was a consensual hand grab. Thank you. And and whereas I think the way he um uncomfortably so, grabbed her at this, put his arm around her, let's be precise,
Mhm,
at this event at the Air National Guard base was weird, odd. She didn't really respond to that.
mhm,
Again, the visuals of that moment, I don't understand. Like, okay, you've got the base secured, hopefully. You show up to the event. All right. Well, I mean, it's they're announcing it, so you're the governor. Okay. All right. But you're gonna wear. I mean, I don't want to get bogged down in what a woman wears. I certainly don't want to get into that,
No, and
end of it.
and
But it
in
was
her book, Gretchen Whitmer focused on that, response that she got after her first State of the State address when she was wearing a blue dress and everyone was focused on that instead of what she had to say, and that was significant enough for her to write about, and,
right.
it's totally a fair thing for us to talk about because there are huge double standards for female politicians and women in
Absolutely.
general.
Right. Right. And I want to acknowledge that, but it was just, I didn't understand the. It was a purposeful choice. I can't
Mhm,
imagine someone shoved that hat on her head.
mhm,
That's a purposeful choice, and just when you think through that, and I mean, I don't want to get bogged down in minutia, but it's another detail that is left that leaves people questioning
mhm.
um, the strategy here. And I mean, I'm left, me personally, I'm left with the thought of thinking, I believe, or I'm getting the sense that she's given up on the idea of national office in
Okay.
2020. Um,
Because
and so
her moves are very different from other, Democrats who have been named, among that, very short list, of presidential contenders, like serious ones, like J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And, I think it's interesting because to me, Gavin Newsom was making a lot of the same moves that Gretchen Whitmer was early on in Trump's second presidency. He had this podcast where it was like a who's who of right wing figures. And he was just like, well, Democrats have to change and nobody's happy. And, maybe we just got to shift to the right and not do this woke stuff. But when Trump invaded LA, his biggest city, with ICE, with the National Guard, with the Marines, I think he got the message that, people want me to stand up. I'm not going to say that this came from personal courage, but, he seemed to read the room. And, he's now become one of the most forceful critics of Trump and a real symbol of blue states trying to push back. Even like he's saying, let's go ahead and gerrymander California if they want to gerrymander Texas. Let's fight fire with fire. But I'm not seeing that same response from Whitmer, which, kind of has led to a lot of speculation that, I've seen both in the national press and, frankly, around Michigan, because as you know, Michigan is an extremely small place, even though we're 10 million people. And, it takes 10 hours to get from one end to the other. But most of the folks that I see have kind of come to the conclusion that she is not running in 2028. And then the question is, okay, so what does she want to do? Has she just decided enough is enough? There have been so many threats to my family, to me, and I'm going to take a bow and leave. What is your sense?
yeah, that's a great question. My sense is I don't see her as an ambitionless person. So I don't think she's given up on something post governorship. I mean, there could be a crude calculation here, and this is all speculation, of the Democrats nominating another female to run for president. Maybe there's a crude calculation that that's not going to happen.
Mm,
Um, and she doesn't want to take that chance, like not be that sacrificial cow, so to speak. Um, uh, uh, I don't know what I that is in her mind. She would have to answer that,
mhm.
obviously. I would just say that the moves that she's made since Donald Trump took office for the second time have not been the moves of somebody who is going to be seeking to run for the presidency.
Mhm.
because you don't split your base or divide you don't split your base at the beginning. And
Mhm.
so there are hardcore Gretchen Whitmer supporters who are convinced that she's a wily politician, and she's playing the old man, and she's just playing his game, and he doesn't know what's going to hit him, and she knows what she's doing,
Mm.
and I'm sure there's a part of that, but I think that especially with a radicalized Democratic base, and I whether the Democratic Party's leadership wants to recognize it or not, their rank and file is radicalized,
Yes.
and they are very much not in line for more of the same.
Right.
And so I just think there's a large contingent of people who are turned off by this
Yes.
compromising. And so I don't see that's not any sort of strategy for I'm going to run for the White House. I don't see how that works. So
Yeah.
whatever her plan is, I mean, if she hopes that a Democrat will get elected, maybe she'd get appointed to a cabinet position. That's always a possibility.
Mhm.
Um, does she really want to be a VP candidate? I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, it's hard to say. I would just say that the Gretchen Whitmer that we saw before and the one we see now are vastly different.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And you know, when you think about J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, again, another loud voice, uncompromising against this Trump onslaught against civil rights and constitutional freedoms. And um, you know, here in Michigan, we have one of the largest ICE detainment facilities in the Midwest in Baldwin, Michigan. It's a former state prison that's been converted, run by the Geo Group, this
Right.
private prison group.
And
And
Advance has done great work reporting on that.
and thank you. And I think that the reason why this particular facility is one of the largest in the Midwest is because Illinois, as a state, has said we're not going to house ICE detainees here. Beyond we're not going to allow that type of private prison to be placed here.
Right.
And to be fair, there's a blue legislature there and a blue governor, and so they've been able to do that. But I've heard not a peep out of Governor Whitmer about the fact that her state is hosting one of the largest ICE detaining facilities in the Midwest, and where people are uh, being taken and kept, and we don't know under what circumstance.
And what is going on in those facilities? Because I've talked with lawyers who are representing, clients. Actually, our Lincoln Project lawyer does pro bono work at a facility in Aurora, Colorado. I mean, it's horrific. The biggest, um, I think, symbol of the disgusting conditions is the so-called alligator Alcatraz in the middle of the Everglades in Florida, where if you just look at it, I mean, that's a concentration camp. You know it. Anyone who's seen the photos of camps throughout history can recognize it. But these private prisons, many of which were operating during Trump's first term and had horrific conditions, it's only gotten worse, and it's a black eye for any state that has one.
And to be fair, it's not as if she can just wave a magic wand and make it go away. It's a federally run facility. A private group is
Right,
running.
but but her administration was doing things to fight this more in the first
Right.
term,
But to
and
not
let's not forget she did have a fully Democratic legislature for 2 years, and this clearly was not a priority to try and make sure that this was shut down in case Trump came back to power.
right. Well, I mean, and that gets into a whole nother conversation about a lack of imagination
Mm,
about what could happen. But regardless of that, this is the situation we find ourselves in now. And again, not a word. She has an enormous bully pulpit, and she still has the ability to speak and speak loudly,
mhm,
and has not. She's been quiet, absolutely
yeah,
silent, frankly, on it. And I think that is to her detriment. It's a shame, frankly.
mm,
And that somebody in that position that you can't even speak out about it. We're not asking you to expend any political capital. We're not asking you to, uh, you know, um, do anything above and beyond, but to it not at least acknowledge that this exists and that it is not right and
Mhm.
and that we should be opposing it. That leaves a lot of questions. And so that authenticity that we talked about at the beginning is fading. And
Mm,
it's hard to recall it. It's hard to see it now. And that's a shame.
mm. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. Several weeks ago, we had Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel on the show, and she's been, at the forefront with, a handful of blue state AGs and filing lawsuit against the Trump administration for everything from his immigration policies to the staffing cuts under Doge. It seems to me that she's operating very much in the same way that she did during Trump's first term. Um, and yet, the Whitmer administration has not joined on to the vast majority of those lawsuits, which is a change from the first Trump presidency when they worked hand in glove to oppose Trump. It seems to me that there there seems to be some tension between the attorney general and the governor, even though they're both Democrats. I know there's also another point of contention with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is a quasi governmental entity that basically hands out a bunch of tax breaks to corporations to get them to stay. Every state has one of these. That's probably a discussion for another day. But, you have a Democratic AG that's not afraid to go after a Democratic administration, in the governorship, for possible, fiscal malfeasance, which is what attorneys general are supposed to do. So we have that situation. I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of tension between them. But the third leg of the stool, because Michigan is run by Democratic women, is Jocelyn Benson, who's the Secretary of State running for governor. We happen to have her on our show tomorrow. Again, during the first Trump administration, worked hand in hand with Nessel and Whitmer, especially on making sure that Trump didn't meddle with elections, which is, primarily what Jesselyn Benson does as Secretary of State. She has been very strong, by advocating for democracy and making sure that we preserve fair and free elections. She seems to still be looking to take Trump on in that way. I'm kind of wondering, let I definitely wanna talk about where the governor's race is at and what you're seeing because it's an interesting situation in Michigan. You have a former Democratic mayor. He's still the mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, but now all of a sudden he's an independent. He was Joe Biden's best friend too, so it's kind of an interesting turn. But he's running for governor and could be spoiler. So we've a really fascinating election going on in what's still, I think, considered a blue state, especially for state elections, if not just, purple. But in general, what does this mean for Michigan? Is this just all inside baseball if you have, your three top executives that maybe aren't all on the same page anymore? Or do you see is this having implications? Like, what might this mean for elections in Michigan in 2026? Just the way elections work, because we know that Trump has been meddling in states and demanding voter rolls and threatening to jail elections officials.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It does have, I think, a portent of some of the divisions within the Democratic Party writ large. So the tension that you mentioned between the Attorney General Dana Nessel and Governor Whitmer, I mean, I would go as I'd say it's a rift. I think
Mm.
it's more than just tension. I think there's a definite rift there. Dana Nessel has been leading many of these co-attorneys general efforts at filing lawsuits, which have really been frankly have been effective in blunting where possible a lot of the unconstitutional actions of of the Trump administration. And so uh, you have that rift going on there, and it's I think that there's a sense of from Dana Nessel that she's also somewhat befuddled, I think,
Mm.
by the lack of her partner, in Governor Whitmer. I mean, there's a very, famous photo after the 2022 election wins by all three of the top elected women, where they took a Charlie's Angels pose together. I think
Yeah,
at the
we
election
and
night
we
party.
posted that before, and I'll do that in the write-up of this so you can see it.
Yeah,
It was it harkens back to a much more fun moment in politics than we're at right
right.
now.
And so you have that moment of cohesion and camaraderie, and that is now gone, clearly. And you mentioned the MEDC investigation that's going on. That's all inside Michigan stuff, but it does pretend to that there's a rift there between Dana Nessel and Governor Whitmer. But as to Jocelyn Benson, that third leg,
Mhm.
I think that she has, in a lot of ways, has picked up a lot of the uh, support that had previously been sort of a lot of that hope, I guess,
Mm.
that had been sort of imbued into Governor Whitmer, and now I think that that here's Jocelyn Benson, who she has also. I mean, look, there were armed protesters outside her home,
In
after the
2020.
2020
Yeah.
election. So she's faced down these people as well, and she's been uncompromising, and she's remained uncompromising in that stance about
Mhm.
that we will have free, fair, and democratic elections. And so, as she moves forward, and the Republicans in Michigan who took back the state house in the midterm or in the 2024 election, sorry, um, they have gone after Jocelyn Benson. They're issuing subpoenas and and
They
and
wanna impeach, like, Dana
impeachment
Nessel
resolution,
and
right?
yeah.
And they've got and it's funny because it seems like I doesn't the more they go after her, I think the stronger they make her with the base of the Democratic Party, and I think really give her a good starting point to move forward. That a lot of her fellow candidates were like, I wish they'd kind of go after me, you know.
And we should
Uh,
say this is the Trump playbook. I mean, Trump just, it was amplifying that CGI video of President Obama being arrested by the FBI in the Oval Office. I mean, go after your enemies, arrest them, impeach them for made up crimes, which, frankly is frightening, for you and I, as, being history lovers. We've seen this playbook. We've seen how this works in authoritarian countries, and it seems to me that, yes, this is something that's going on in Michigan. Yes, this is definitely, trying to take shots for the 2026 election, because potentially Jocelyn Benson could be running against, a member of the Michigan legislature next year, if they're both nominees. But more than that, this is intimidation. This is, following what Trump is doing on the national level. And, we have many, many Trumps running around trying to do that. And, that's an abuse of power. That's not, how things are supposed to work.
Absolutely. And so her remaining uncompromising in the midst of all that is what people want. They want I and we'll say specifically what the Democratic base wants is they want uncompromising stance of protecting values and constitutional principles, and that there really can be no compromise on those things. And so they appreciate that, and I think that she has been the beneficiary of that in political goodwill,
Hmm.
by remaining on that path. You mentioned Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan earlier, who is, running this independent campaign, and really is, I think, on track to be a spoiler potentially. The idea that somehow he's really going to win, and it's ridiculous. I mean,
Right.
I
But,
it's it,
he definitely seems like he is making moves to appeal to the right and to hurt Democrats because he's saying, "Fine, Donald Trump, you wanna send ICE into Detroit, do whatever you want." I mean, not He's not taking the stance of a lot of mayors. Yeah, I mean, we've seen mayors in other cities be arrested for standing up for their constituents and for their cities. That's not Mike Duggan. He's he was trying to get Elon Musk's support for a while, and so definitely it seems like it's more than just, "Hey, a pox on both your houses. I'm an independent now." It definitely seems like he's got some bitterness to his former party.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Elon Musk thing, him trying to win this favor of Elon Musk. And then when he got caught, sort of red handed, when people pointed it out, when I say caught red handed, I mean, when people pointed it out, what he had said and done, suddenly tried to retract it all and pretend, oh, no, I didn't. Oh no,
Mhm.
what are you talking about? Because Elon Musk is somebody who, relative. It's not relatively recently that Elon Musk has not been seen as a genius, and
Well, and,
somebody who's
his chatbot, wants to be known as Mecha Hitler. So this is generally not the kind of guy that you're appealing to if you are just about, smart down the middle policies,
right, exactly. And I recently, Mayor Duggan was able to get the endorsement of the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce,
which
which
is huge here.
right now he's a former board member
Mhm.
of the chamber. It wasn't a shock that they did it, but it was a bit of a surprise. I mean, I think that they would come out and endorse him this early in the process. And but I think it does bring to mind. It does, I think, in a lot of people's minds, it brings to the idea of where the business community stands on these issues. Um, they mouth the values, of a DEI, and Pride Month and all these things when it suits them,
Mhm.
and then when it doesn't, they're perfectly willing to just drop those and move forward. And I think that the endorsement of Mike Duggan as an independent candidate and this system, I mean, it's it's the system's not made for independent candidates to win
Right, and in
statewide office.
other states, there's a history, if you're running in Maine, you can win statewide office as an independent, but there's no history of that in Michigan. It's a huge, diverse state, and, never say never because I do think we are definitely in unprecedented times, but, the odds are that ultimately Mike Duggan will just be a spoiler, not the next governor of Michigan.
Right, and when we say spoiler, it's as you mentioned earlier, is he's going to spoil it in terms of pulling votes away from Democrats
Right,
and potentially putting a Republican over the finish line.
right.
Uh, who that Republican will be is another interesting thing. On the Republican side, in the race for governor in Michigan, we have John James, Congressman
Out
John James.
out in Southeast Michigan, Macomb County,
Right.
and, twice ran for Senate, US Senate, and lost, and finally did win for Congress twice.
Right. And so he announced his campaign for governor, and there's been a first subtly and now not so subtle campaign that he needs to drop that and run for Congress again, because of concerns
Because
that seat that he's vacating would be taken by a Democrat.
right,
Uh,
and he barely won the first time
right.
when he ran in 2022, and, the conventional wisdom is if there had been a stronger candidate, like an Andy Levin who was running, that he would not have won.
Right. Exactly. And so there's a lot of pressure on John James to drop out. Um, and also on the Republican side for the governor's race here, we have former Attorney General Mike Cox, State Attorney
Whose
General.
whose wife, Laura, was running the Michigan Republican Party during the 2020 election, and, if you wanna see some hostage-taking videos, look at the videos that she did with Rudy Giuliani after Trump lost the 2020 election, but Rudy Giuliani came in here to try and get the Michigan legislature to flip the results of the election in Donald Trump's favor, and she was a key part of that.
Yeah, she she took it. Her participation in that, if you go look at the details, if you go look at the January 6th congressional report, She
She's
took it about
all
as
over
far
it.
as you could take it and not end up with legal
Yeah,
culpability.
you would think that her attorney husband might have told her, "Hey, might be getting into some legal hot water here." But now, he has not been in office for, a decade, and this is his big comeback. He did run for governor in 2010 and got his clock cleaned, even though he was expected to be the Republican nominee. Since then, the only thing I've seen of Mike Cox is, he's been all over those ads about, contaminated water at military bases, and he will fight for you, but now he's running.
Right. And so there's not a strong Republican
Eric
field.
Eric Nesbitt, we should say, who's the Senate Minority Leader, and it definitely has a hand in all of these, efforts for the legislature to go after Jocelyn Benson.
Right. And he seems to be sort of the right hand man for Matt Hall, the House Speaker. He
Right.
doesn't seem to be. I don't sense from Eric Nesbitt that he has his own power base, his own uh,
Yeah.
vision, philosophy, leadership. But we'll see. Either way, there's not a. I don't see a very strong field of candidates on the Republican side right now. It's early. I mean, we're a year out from the primary,
Right.
um, and uh, and so this is where Mike Duggan's spoiler really comes into play. If you don't have a strong Republican candidate, um, then it becomes all that much more important to bring somebody in that can sort of pull away Democratic votes.
Right.
And I think Jocelyn Benson is sort of is a strong candidate right now. And again, we're a year out.
But she
But
has a lot of
uh,
endorsements, and she's got
right,
name ID because that's one of the advantages of being Secretary of State. Your name is all over, the offices whenever you have to go renew your license. You know who the Secretary of State is. And I should say, one of the drudgeries of just existing is having to deal with either the DMV or the Secretary of State. And it is a remarkably better experience, I have to say, going to get anything done, at your Secretary of State's office now than it was. You can make an appointments of sitting there for half your day. So I think that's a help to her, and, believe me, nobody on the Democratic side, if things were still a mess over there, they wouldn't be keeping their mouths shut because nobody likes dealing with that sort of bureaucracy. And you also hear her name if you're flying out of Detroit Metro Airport because, she was always telling you to get your real ID and making sure that you knew that it was Jocelyn Benson who was telling you to do that. So she's been savvy. We should mention her potential opponents include Gretchen Whitmer's lieutenant governor, who's Garland Gilchrist, the first African American lieutenant governor in the state. He seems to be trying to put some daylight between he and the governor as well. That's my take. I don't know what yours is.
I think you're right that he's trying, but
It's
I mean,
hard.
she seems to be tacitly, she being Governor Whitmer,
Mhm.
tacitly endorsing him. Hasn't come out and made any endorsement, but where
It
there
would
are
it would look
events.
very bad if she did not appear to be in his corner, let's face it.
I agree. I agree. And, since he announced that he was going to run, uh, s- uh, where there have been events where the governor he has been there as well, and he's speaking first now.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes she's making sure that he is speaking, and I've noticed that in a lot of the press releases, there's been more emphasis on the Whitmer Gilchrist administration.
Mhm.
Really
Like the
emphasized
Biden-Harris administration.
exactly,
Yeah.
which that's how that works. The thing about Garland Gilchrist is, he is a policy wonk.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy, from Detroit, business savvy. He's a
Mhm.
tech guy. There's a lot going for him. Politically
Mhm.
speaking, it seems to me that at some point he's really skating a real fine line of he wants the governor's endorsement, but at a certain point he's really got to make his own sense of who he is. He's not
Right, which
just
is
her lieutenant governor.
and that's forever the struggle with LGs or VPs,
Right.
and there's a reason why very few vice presidents have won elections in their own rights, because it's a long shadow and it's hard to escape it. I do want to mention Chris Swanson, who is the uh, sheriff of Genesee County in Southeast Michigan. He is also running for governor. He has quite a personality. He's one of those people who takes over a room. Obviously, doesn't have the same name ID as Jocelyn Benson or Garland Gilchrist, but I think he's trying to connect with that base of the Democratic Party that just wants somebody who's out there doing something, saying that they're going to fight for them. And to be honest, from what I've seen, and this seems to be true in Michigan and across the country, it seems like people, in the Democratic base who are showing up to the anti-Trump protests and, are really involved in the pro-democracy movement. It doesn't seem to be about ideology to me because, whether they're responding to, Zoran Mandami out in New York or, somebody like, Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan, who's our junior senator, who's very centrist, but she's out there. She's not looking to be friends with Donald Trump. She's criticizing his foreign policy and his domestic policy right and left. And while people may not like that, she's been one of those people who say enough with the woke talk, and that's definitely an argument to be had. And some people are very offended by it, but she's not saying we gotta just, be Republicans light. She's saying, "Let's fight Trump, but let's fight Trump smartly." And so, to me, I think the danger for Democrats is for folks who are kind of playing it like politics as usual. We had Abdul Al Sayed, who ran against Gretchen Whitmer for governor in 2018, was a darling of the Bernie left, got a lot of press. She won all 83 counties in the primary. He ended up not doing very well, but his campaign seems a lot smarter to me this time around. I mean, I don't see that he's compromised on his, leftist vision, but he seems conscious of the fact that, you know what? I'm not going to say I don't need the quote unquote brunch crowd. He's not being dismissive and saying, oh, the wine moms, Planned Parenthood, all of those institutions are against me. He's saying, I want your vote. This is what I want to do. This is my vision. I want healthcare for all. But, I understand that it takes a big tent and, fuck Donald Trump. I'm going to fight for you. And people are responding to that. Not just, in the bluest part of the state in the city of Detroit, but even up in the Upper Peninsula, people are turning out to see him, which should be a huge warning sign, I think, to folks like, from the Gretchen Whitmer part of the party that this is not going to be a rerun of the 2018 election in 2026. People are pissed and they want
Right.
people to fight. And so, to me, it seems like 2026 is going to be a fascinating election in a swing state like Michigan and nationwide. And so I appreciate that you're coming on to fill us in with these details because nobody knows what's going on the ground, more than folks who are reporting on it. So, can you tell us, John, the best way to find your work and the work of your team at the Michigan Advance?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Michiganadvance.com is where you would find, I think, the work that we do. As you mentioned, that's the outlet that founded and brought to prominence, and we're doing our best to keep
You're
it.
the newspaper of the year.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's 2 years
And
running.
that
Um,
those awards are not just handed out. That's the hard work of you and your team, and you should be commended for it.
well, thank you very much. Well, we won't go back to the mutual love fest. I think it's a given. We appreciate each other, but yeah, MichiganAdvance.com. I think we are working every day to try and stay on top of what's happening here in Michigan, and as you so eloquently just sort of summarized, what is happening here in Michigan, is somewhat of a barometer for what is happening around the rest of the country. And I, hope that folks more and more people I know are turning away from corporate media, and turning to efforts, like Lincoln Square Media, like Michigan Advance, and nonprofit news, and so trying to really take an honest look at what is happening around us, and more importantly, put it in context, and give us the why, not just the why, the what.
And you
Um,
do yeah, you do that so well because, it's so clear that you want people to understand what's going on in their government and why, who's making these decisions. It's not just everything's terrible, and it's this amorphous blob of awful, which is an understandable feeling, but, it's great to have news outlets like yours that, tell people what's going on. And, I'm proud to be part of independent media where, you will never find us bend the knee to Donald Trump and his administration. We are here to hold him accountable, and we are. This is the place that you can turn to tell it to you straight about what he's doing and what we can do to fight back.
yeah, for sure.
So thank you, John. I appreciate it. I know we'll be checking in with you to see what's going on in Michigan as the 2026 elections draw closer. Maybe not as close as a lot of us wish they were, but it is states, as we've seen for like the last several election cycles, like Michigan, that really determine the direction of the country. So it's so great to have you here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure, Susan.
Thanks, John. And thank you, all of you, for tuning in.